Rellana is one of my favourite bosses in Elden Ring. And since her swords and her spell got buffed in the latest patch, I figured it was time for the Rellana run. So in this video, we're going to go get everything we need very early on from a fresh character, fighting Rellana as the 4th boss of the game. Then we're going to go through all of the different builds and stat distributions you can use these weapons with. So we're back to the base game, and I started with Bandit. And while it's one of the worst classes for some of the stat distributions we'll be using later, it's really good for getting to the DLC early, which is the important bit. And since this is the setup that I theorised would be really good for this purpose since the start, I wanted it to be the first one I tried. To get set up, follow my standard setup guide, grabbing both the smithing stones and the sombers. Then cheesing the cavalry and killing Grail to grab these levels. For our weapon, we're using the Reduvia. So head down into Argyll Lake and gank Neregus with Yura. Level the Reduvia to +6. So for the first boss of the run, Godskin Noble. Now a word on difficulty for anyone who may have flinched at that sentence. For any base game and DLC run, I think it's more interesting to try to get to the DLC as early as possible without turning it into a challenge run. However, if you're relatively new to the game, I'd advise do much more of the base game for levels before doing this. Noble is fine with a +6 Reduvia regardless of whether you go for R1 spam or parries. The reason we go for early Noble is we want the +7 Somber behind him, so we can head into the DLC with a +9 weapon. Head through the manor, past the Stone Sword key gate, and drop down to grab this, picking up the Dagger Talisman on the way. And with a +9 Reduvia, with perfect stamina management you can actually kill him in phase 1. However, just by spamming R1s and dodging the meteor, this is an easy fight regardless. Now to Vare to start his questline. Either do the invasions or go fight Magnus. Then kill Irina to save time on the next bit. Realise you don't have the cloth yet because you're a fucking idiot. Go get the cloth. Then have to traipse all the way up to the Frenzied Village to the other maiden for the Lord of Blood's favour. Before we head to Mogwin's Palace, go to the abandoned cave in Caelid for the Golden Scarab. You can kill the Clean Rock Knights very easily by spamming R1 or parry. I'll be forgetting to switch to this talisman for extra runes on every boss in the run. When you get to the palace, double back quick to do a supermarket sweep of all of the good runes in the Blood River area. They'll come in handy later. Grab the Lord's rune as you run through the cave, and there's some smithing stone 8s to the left of it. This route is very safe and you probably won't get hit. Speaking of close calls, make sure you bring some kukris with you for this bit, because while breaking pots does work, it's not exactly what you'd call safe. And although it's tempting, don't use the Ancient Somber yet. Now for Moog, and it's just a case of spam R1 and don't get hit, I'm afraid. This isn't awful though. What you're watching here is me fighting him with Radagon Soreseal and just the Dex Physick. I'd recommend the Dex Physick and the Purifying tier to prevent you losing all of your heals to Nihil. The Reduvia will delete his phase 1, but you will have to fight him in phase 2. We have good enough vigour to take a beating, so as long as you have a relatively good knowledge of phase 2, you'll be absolutely fine. Finally, head to the Walking Mausoleum to dupe Radagon's remembrance for some extra runes. Pop everything you have on you before taking our final levels for the DLC. When I got to the Land of Shadow, I grabbed my favourite talisman from the Scorched Ruins. Then did the first part of my DLC setup route. Although if you wanted to do the additional bit for more levels, this would be a great run to do it on. Now for Castle Ensis. And before or after the boss fight, we want to grab some stuff from here. First up, kill the Golem for a Somber 9. Then grab a Somber 1 next to the Grace. Then when you get to the stairs, before Carian Parry God 2.0, hang a right and up the ladder for a Somber 6. So Rellana, and again to show you the absolute worst case scenario, I'm just sticking to Radagon Soreseal and the Dex Physick. I'd really recommend parrying here to take advantage of the Reduvia's high critical attacks and give you some super safe bleed opportunities in between. The bleed is key here in making sure that that massive DLC health bar isn't unmanageable. Due to our level 9 Shadow Blessing, we can also afford to take some hits. Before heading back to the base game, we're going to head to the ruined forge of Starfall Past. This is such a great dungeon for upgrades. If I were to make an early DLC setup route for multiple weapons, this forge would certainly be in it, as it contains so many smithing stones, including the Somber 7 and 8 we need urgently. But grab absolutely everything in this place, as we will be using it later. Head back to the base game and across the Aeonian swamp for the Somber 5 down the alley. Now to Rhea Lucaria for Red Wolf, who's a joke as you'd expect. And Rellana doesn't stand a chance even if pretty much everything goes wrong. Now we can respec, we need a larval tier. A nice quick one can be sourced by beating the transforming lobster just north of the boar prawn shack in Liurnia. Head to another walking mausoleum to dupe Rellana's remembrance and buy both of her items and all of the gear from Enya at the round table before heading to Rellana for our first respec. So while I'm grabbing some old favourites from the base game, let's talk about Rellana's twin blades. The right sword deals physical and magic damage, the left sword deals physical and fire damage. R1 is your dual wielding moveset, R2 gives you heavy attacks with the magic sword, and L1 gives you standard R1 attacks but with the fire sword, meaning you can do some quite silly stuff as we'll see later. When wielded just as physical weapons, they'll output the most damage if you have a quality build setup. If you're relatively new to this, quality means split scaling between strength and dex. However, like the Sword of Night and Flame, the flame weapon art scales best with faith, and the magic weapon art scales best with int. So for our first lot of stats, I went with the weapon requirements and good investment in faith. The only reason I went heavy in faith early on is we're going to use the Golden Vow incantation, as the extra damage and defense it provides is going to be a lot better than anything our levels would give us at this moment. Now, if you're being intelligent and following the path of least resistance, the best route forward for any early DLC run is grab the stuff you need, then go complete the whole base game before coming back here. And that's certainly what I would recommend. Anyway, I was heading to Gaius. Gaius is a really good boss for figuring out new weapons, as he has a great mix of tiny and massive attack opportunities. So when dual wielding the swords normally, the first thing you'll notice is the first 2 attacks of the R1 combo can be squeezed in just about anywhere. However, against bosses, anything more than a single R1 will lock you into a longer attack string, which can almost immediately get you killed. So certainly against Gaius, rolling attacks, charges, and single R1s are your friend. On the phase transition attack, you can comfortably fit in the fire weapon art. It does fuck all damage, but it looks cool, and that's what counts. It does do pretty good posture damage, so if you keep up the aggression afterwards, you can actually get a stagger. Because I'd grown quite fond of my fire tornado, I thought I'd go see the DLC boss that's hilariously weak to fire. Even with minimal stat investment, the fire portion of the weapon art absolutely shreds the tree avatar for an easy boost in runes early on this run. For quick attacks, just use the L1 rather than dual wield. After this, I thought I'd head down to the Cerulean coast for the Putrescent Knight. And although there are a couple of good opportunities for the magic weapon art here, like Gaius, I found myself just going for single R1s and tapped R2s here. While the damage was decent, it just felt like a dual wield Milady run for the most part. So afterwards, I decided a change was in order. So first I went back to Castle Ensis, past Moonface, to the altar behind to grab Rellana's cameo. Then to the graveyard near the Cathedral of Dragon Communion for another larval tier to respec. So with my build respect to INT Faith, the damage of standard attacks has gone down a bit. However, both of my special attacks have been boosted, so I'll now be relying on them to do the bulk of the damage. The Rellana's cameo talisman now boosts attack damage by a whopping 45% after you hold the stance for 1 second, down from 1.5 on last patch, and it's pretty effective. So effective that I finally felt ready to take on Margit. And I'm sorry to report that Godric didn't fare much better either. With Godric down, I headed up to the tower to grab his Great Rune. Then headed back to the round table to give Knobhead the potion, and back to Celibus to grab the magic scorpion charm, now that I had 3 talisman slots. And although I found myself consistently not using the charged power of Rellana's cameo, instead going for the fastest possible attack wind-ups, when I did get a chance to take advantage of it, it's pretty damn noticeable. Afterwards, I ran through Lanedale, bullied the tree avatar, and cracked open some runes for extra levels. Now for Godfrey. And nothing much out of the ordinary for Godfrey. The safe approach is always to stick to R1s and rolling attacks between all of his combos. For Morgott, I'll just let this one play. When you get to the Zamor ruins in the mountaintops of the Giants, head down to the cellar to grab the smithing bell bearing 3. Although it's not that important now. One of my least favourite moments on every run is this little bit where I go down here and bait the big guy into hitting the stone for the smithing stones, then mooch around and grab some others. With the DLC, however, gathering stones is much more fun. For your smithing 6s and a couple of extra 8s, you can go to the Fort of Reprimand. Up the ladder by the Omen Killer, there's 4 smithing 8s. And then down in the basement, there's a chest full of 5s and 6s. For a bunch of 7s, you can go to the Fog Rift Fort, where you'll find Black Knight Garrow. And because his name starts with Black Knight, break out the buckler again for some parrying fun. In the chest just behind, we have the 7s. Combined with everything that we grabbed earlier and the stones we can now buy, we have enough for a plus 23 smithing staff. And to grab one of the staffs we'll be using, back to Lanedale and down the well into the Shunning Grounds, and all the way down to Sewer Moog. The magic attack of the Twin Blades works quite well here, alongside rolling attacks and R1s. Then through the Invis wall into Deeproot Depths. We're here to grab the Prince of Death's staff. Now this staff is still the best for higher levels of Int and Faith, and is the least annoying Int Faith staff to get. The Staff of the Great Beyond is a good DLC alternative. But, no. And the reason that I grabbed the staff here is because I wanted to use Rennala's spell on Fire Giant, and there's a bit of a problem there. So as well as the Prince of Death's staff, I also grabbed Rennala's staff from the round table, leveled it up, and headed down into Nokron for more larval tears. So now we're going for a full INT setup, because 21 Vigor is fine if you don't get hit. The magic part of the weapon art does really solid damage for Fire Giant with pure INT scaling. And while you're watching the rest of this fight, please imagine that I remembered to equip the right stuff. And a pro tip, don't try to end the fight in a fancy way, as you'll get yourself in all sorts of trouble. Strangely, I've quite missed Skinny and Fatty, so I wanted to fight them straight up without using the sleep cheese, parrying Noble as usual and using his rolling attack to give me opportunities for the weapon art. After this, we can do Alexander's questline, then head up to the Faram rooftops to grab his shard for a big boost in weapon art damage. I'd also grabbed the Blasphemous Claw for some Malekith parries, but as it turns out, I didn't even need it. Hello old friend, how I haven't missed you. For Godfrey, as usual I got stuck in with quick attacks to build up as much posture damage as possible. Strangely, Placidusax was probably the longest fight on this whole run, with that big health bar and all his resistances taking a good while to deplete. The magic weapon art is good for attacking at a distance, but you're unlikely to get any staggers on this one. Run to the side of the arena during the final lightning storm to get behind him for the lasers, and save yourself a little bit of time. Now back to the DLC for a couple of the big fights I wanted to do with this INT build. First to the Shadow Keep, to the Secret Room, and start making your way down to the Abyssal Woods. I killed the 2 hippos along the way, for 2 more Shadow Tree fragments. For Midra on an INT build, there's 2 options. The first is waiting for those longer attack opportunities and getting stuck in with the weapon art. Or, if you're a big fan of this boss and quite like the idea of doing fuck all damage against him, you can break out the buckler for some parries. Next, for a bit of admin in setting up the NPCs for the Leda fight. Kill the Hippo boss in the Shadow Keep, speak to Leda, and then help her kill Hornsent in the area by the boats. And as you continue through the Shadow Keep, make sure you head down the stairs just past the 4th floor Grace and into this room for the scroll for Arnsbark, giving it to him afterwards. For Mesmer, obviously the quicker attacks work fine, but if you're brave enough, there is a surprising amount of space for the magic weapon art. You need to be super quick at starting it, so have your stance held as you're rolling and cue it the second you see the window. It's incredibly satisfying when you pull it off. Now, since I tried this weapon on pure INT, I also wanted to try it on pure Faith, and now seemed like a good time to do that. Now, due to the fact that the left-handed moveset of this weapon always gives you the fire sword, you can be absolutely childish and stick your buckler in your right hand and attack with your left hand for a Faith-based parry approach. Or, if you're not a complete moron, you just want to go with dual wielding and focusing on the heavy weapon art. And I was actually quite surprised how often you can get away with it safely in the Radagon fight. That being said, you can also get caught out. And while this setup is supremely good for fire weak enemies, the damage really isn't great for standard ones. Elden Beast was a pretty long fight. Once again, the positive of the fire weapon art is although you have that long animation, it does reward you with pretty good posture damage. The result of this on a boss with low posture, like Romina, is you can throw caution to the wind and brute force the fight with the weapon art to get some riposte opportunities. Just bring a lot of flasks with you. Before Leda, head back to Thiolier for the final bit of dialogue. The weapon art is really good for the gank fight, and a better option than magic, as NPC enemies tend to roll it pretty easily. For the final bosses, I wanted to finish how I started, with a quality setup for maximum melee damage. While the rolling attack and R1s work great for consort, I actually wanted to go for parries, because the recent changes have turned this fight basically into Sekiro. I absolutely adore how aggressive you can be now, and I do genuinely love this as a parry fight now. For Bale, you have a good choice between charges and R1s, but you can get a full combo out of the bigger opening. The one opening I particularly like in this fight is this attack. When you see that pulsating wind up, you want to roll towards his missing leg while unlocking your camera. This is a great opportunity for charged R2s with heavy weapons and big combos for smaller ones. The magic attack also comes in handy for attacks where you want to be at a distance. Honestly, my plan for Melania was to film a whole bunch of cinematic footage, but I genuinely don't think I'd have got anything cooler than the footage I got completely by accident when I first fought her. The way the magic attack staggers her, giving you just enough time to avoid the next attack, is super satisfying. And with her weakness to fire, the heavy weapon art is great, but a little risky as well. Parrying gives you the perfect opportunity to shoehorn in weapon arts as she stands up. So, what's the verdict? Rellana build, any good? I'd say that you'd probably get more out of this build if you tried it at a higher level. With all of the different scaling, and the fact you'd need 72 int to use the spell, this build would actually be a lot comfier on a level 300 character. So if you have a New Game Plus character, I would definitely recommend trying it on that. But I did have great fun trying this on New Game. And that's it. How to get Rellana set up early, and all of the different ways of using it. If you've enjoyed the video, give it a like, and subscribe to the channel for more. As always, thanks for watching. See you soon.